Good afternoon. I've had a wonderful time at the MaD conference. I hope all of you have been as inspired by what you've done in the last 3 days as I've been inspired in the very brief time since I've been in Hong Kong. I arrived late last night, was so excited. This is my third time in Hong Kong, so excited to be back. And now I'm going to be talking just for the next 20 minutes about learning the future together. But first, learning how to, there we go. Humanities' fourth information age. I talked about this a little bit at the session earlier today. You at the MaD conference are the first generation to come of age in humanities' fourth great information age. There's a very famous historian, Robert Darnton, who came up with this idea that in all of human history, there have been 4 times when the modes of communication and interaction have changed so radically that the world was different. Now, when he talks about this, he means all the way back through human history, beginning with the first great information age, which is in 4000 BCE in ancient Mesopotamia, when people invent writing systems. Not everybody liked it. By 400 BCE, which is the great classical age of Greece, the alphabet is being written down, and the famous philosopher Socrates hates writing. He is saying the new technology of writing is hurting our brains, it's hurting our attention, it's making our memories shorter. He doesn't like it at all. Fortunately, he had a very good disciple named Plato who followed him around and wrote down everything that Socrates was saying. So in human history, we have those responses about how this technology of writing was destroying the world. The second great information age happens with movable type, which happens in China in the 10th century and in Europe in the Renaissance with Gutenberg. In this information age, for the first time, you didn't have to write out books by hand. You actually could print a book with movable type and reproduce the book for a larger world. Now, that larger world was still the aristocracy, academics, the legal profession, government, so a very small area of society. But nonetheless, it made it possible to reproduce books without the church or the government telling you what was the right books to print. Many people didn't like Gutenberg. Many people protested the movable type and were afraid about movable type. The third great information age is the one that's actually my original area of study. This, I don't know if you can see this. This is the video game of the 18th century. Okay. This is called a Duodecimo. It's a very cheap little book. Working class and middle class people could afford this book because of industrialization. There were steam-powered presses, machine-made ink, machine-made paper, and for the first time in human history, middle class and even working class readers could afford to buy books. Now, why this is important, I'm going to make a little aside here. One of my discoveries when I worked on this period was these funny little things in the sides of the pants and the skirts. And I was reading in a diary of somebody named Patty Rogers who said, I just found out from a friend how to make this special little thing called a reticule in which I could hide my novels so my parents and my teachers won't see them. So we actually took one of these and put it in one of the dresses at a historical site in America and found it was completely concealed. This is before there were pockets regularly in the seams of clothes. People disliked this. They were terrified. They were terrified of what would happen when middle class and working class people had the power to read without a preacher telling them what to read. So what happened? The industrial age invented a lot of forms to control and to educate those same people who were the first generation of popular readers. What they were doing was deciding that people needed compulsory education, mandated education for everybody. They needed rules for how to learn. They needed rules for what were called the 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic. A media theorist named Clay Shirky likes to say, institutions tend to preserve the problems they were designed to solve. I'm going to repeat that. Institutions tend to preserve the problems they were designed to solve. In the third great information age, this information age, the end of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century, the problem that was being solved was what to do when there was mass literacy, when people could read. The second problem was how to train people to go from the world of the farmer into the world of the industrial world, where things had to be regularized. The symbol of 19th century schooling, the school bell. Why? Because when you're a farmer, you wake up with the sun. When you work in a factory, waking up with the sun doesn't cut it, right? When you work in a factory, you all have to do the same task at the same time. You're told when to do things, and you do what you're told. So one of the problems that 19th century education is designed to solve is the problem of how to keep people on time, how to teach people that the most important thing is clock time. Monotasking. If you're a farmer working in the field, there's no such thing as monotasking. You do the task that needs to be done, and then something interrupts you and you do that, but you manage to get all your work done. In the industrial age, that's not good enough. In the industrial age, you do the task you're told to do, especially on the assembly line. You do a task over and over and over again. Somebody else on the line does a different task over and over and over again, and the whole process gets repeated. So one of the things 19th century schooling does is trains people to task. Standards and standardization. Again, in a world of artisans and farmers, things don't have to be standardized. In a world of Model Ts, everything is standardized. So part of what happens between about the middle of the 19th century and the beginning of World War I is standardized testing. Again, in the session earlier today, we talked about this. The multiple choice test that now rules so much of all of our lives is actually invented in 1914 to deal with a crisis that happened in 1914, which was immigrants coming into America at a huge number, a need for secondary education, and a war was on. Men were at war, women were in the factories, there were no teachers, so standardized education is invented through the multiple choice test for efficiency, because efficiency is another one of the important words of the industrial age. Hierarchy, specialization, metrics, how we manage. All of these become the problems that education is addressing in the 19th century in order to change a formerly agrarian society into an industrial society. That's the problem that was being solved by the educational system of the last information age. We're in the fourth great information age in human history. That basically starts April 1993, when the Mosaic 1.0 browser becomes public for the first time. Before that, academics used the web, educators used the web, scientists used the web, some governments used the web, but it was not commercially available. My guess is that many of the young scholars who are here today at MaD were 2, 3, 4 years old. Is that right? 2, 3, 4 years old when the web gets invented and when the web is commercialized, right? What that means is you who are at this conference are the first generation to come of age in humanity's fourth great information age. That's daunting, right? Because what happens when there's a great information age is not just technology. It's never just technology. Technologies get invented all the time. What makes one of the great information ages is a change in the way we as humans interact, communicate, think, share ideas, communicate with one another in all kinds of ways. I recently was giving a talk to a very different generation than that's at the MaD conference. It was at a association of retired persons in the United States. And somebody in the audience said, well, the internet doesn't really matter very much to us. That's for young people. And I said, really? If you're sick, let's just say you hurt your elbow. Do you call your doctor, or do you go onto the internet, onto hurtyourelbow.com, and find out how other people deal with a hurt elbow? Well, it turned out everybody at this retirement community would go onto the computer and find out how to deal with their elbow before they called their doctor. Think about that. These are people who are already at the ends of their careers, at the beginning of retirement, and some of them actually were very, very elderly. And their life has been changed. Instead of going to a doctor, that was hierarchy on that past slide, instead of going to a doctor for advice, they go to one another. They find out advice from strangers online. Then they talk to their doctor. This is a dramatic change in human behavior. Because of that, we have new keywords for our age, for the digital age. Some of our keywords, multitasking, right? We remix, we customize, we mash up, right? We're doing many things at once, and we're learning new forms of attention to accommodate new ways that we're processing information. Interaction. When I made that comment about hurtmyelbow.com, one of the things that's about is not just sharing information, but trusting and having some kind of empathy and some way of understanding and believing in non-expert opinions from people we don't know. That's a very interesting idea of humanity. It used to be thought the only people you trusted were people in your village, or people in your clan, or people in your tribe, people in your community. What is the community of the World Wide Web, right? It's all of you in this audience, but all of you are connected to another audience that's out there, and that can be anything. Some of you might be tweeting right now. Who is the audience of the tweet? Our community extends hugely through the world. Collaboration. How do we work productively together, right? We've had 100 years training in how to exceed and excel at the timed standardized test. What does that teach you about how to work with other people, right? When you're a little tiny child, you're told to play well with others. That's a big value, play well with others. Then you get into school and you're immediately told where you rank against everybody else, right? Then you go out into the workforce, and what do they tell you in the workforce? Play well with others, right? Does that mean we have to cancel 12 or 20 years of schooling to learn how to succeed in a workplace that is about collaboration? One of the things I've been doing this year is giving lots of talks to educators and to businesses. Interestingly, it's the businesses that say, please change the education system, not just in the United States, but worldwide. Please change the education system, because it's hard for us to get our smartest students, our smartest new employees out of the mentality that somebody's going to be giving them an A, and get them into the mentality that they have to figure out what their own workflow is going to be. They're going to have to work well with others. They're going to have to admit what they don't do well so they can find a collaborator who does that better and can work with them. Blended skills. Used to be thought there was a difference between hard skills like math and science and so-called soft skills like social science, knowing the human value of work. Then somebody named Steve Jobs, have you heard of him in Asia? Steve Jobs came along and said, computers aren't about technology. The World Wide Web, computation, the world we live in, is about stuff that's integrated into our lives, right? As you all know, Steve Jobs said it was calligraphy, first learning ancient Chinese calligraphy and then various forms of Western calligraphy, that made him reinvent the computer into a beloved object. I don't know any other businessman in the world who has died and been treated like a saint when he died, right? I mean, his death, people mourned his death. Why? We don't want computers to go back to those ugly old things. We love the beauty of computers, but also the way computers are integrated into our lives, right? We've come to depend on them in an incredibly interesting way. It was Steve Jobs that said, technology is not enough, right? What matters for the 21st century is not the division of the humanities and the social sciences and the arts on the one hand from science and business. That's the old way. That's an old-fashioned way. What's needed now is a way where you integrate all of those things together. Right? Data mining, visualization, big data. Every time we go on the computer, every time, we are giving somebody else data. One of the cliches of the computer is if it's for free, you're not the consumer, you're the product being consumed. Okay? What that means is if you go onto a computer, you're giving somebody, probably Google or the equivalent of Google, information about your interests, when you use the computer, how you use the computer, what things you look for in the computer, and all of that is being packaged and sold to somebody else. Okay? Where in our educational system do we teach kids about that role where they themselves, by their actions, are data that's being sold to other people to be sold, but to be sold back to you as products? Okay? Where do we teach kids other versions of the 21st century literacies that are about privacy, security, intellectual property, all of those issues? And most of all, where do we teach kids how to think about the new ways we can know the world because there's so much information available? What I hope the last 3 days have been is a real sense of both challenge and responsibility for those of you who are the first generation to be coming of age in humanity's fourth great information age. There are many, many aspects of that challenge and responsibility. But some I'd like to talk about just very briefly are one, the global. What it means to be part of a global world. The old information age, the last information age, comes into its big ascendancy and is concretized and formalized in the 1890s, just as America is becoming a superpower. I'm convinced if anybody is going to inherit and be the leaders of this information age, it's Asia right now. That Asia's special place in the world gives Asia a chance to reinvent education and the workplace in the same way that America did in the 19th century. That's not going to happen overnight. It never does. As a historian of technology, which is my main field, one thing I know is in the first generation, people are a little crazy about new technologies, right? They're like Socrates saying, oh, this is going to destroy our memory. It's going to destroy attention. It will make us impersonal. It will make us shallow. It will make us silly. It will make us naive. What we find out after we've had a generation with technology, and we're right at that moment now, is actually technology doesn't cause all of our problems, and it doesn't solve all of our problems. We, as humans, have to take control of that technology and find the ways it serves us best so that we are the masters of technology and it's not the master of us. There are many ways that we can do that. One of the ways we can do that is appreciating what this great tool gives us. The ability to have an idea and communicate an idea without an editor telling us what to do. So the big revolution of the last information age was books made available to the public for the first time because they were cheap. Now we live in a world where anybody can basically publish one of these little books, right? Anyone with access to a computer can publish a book. What does that mean about the quality of information in the world? What is our responsibility as the makers of the equivalent of these little books for what we contribute to the world? How are we doing this? What is the purpose? Another fact is this is published by a printer and it goes to one reader. Sometimes readers read aloud to maybe 20 readers, but it's still basically solitary. When I publish now, and I blog almost every day, when I blog now, anybody can be reading that. Anybody can be responding. What is our role as compassionate, empathic, and diverse people in trying to understand some of the things that we learn as we browse the web? Not everything on the web is wonderful. What is our job? What is our responsibility? We think we know what school and work are. We don't. We know the last 100 years of school and work. The question, and I hope everyone leaves with today, is how should we rethink school and work for the digital age? You are the people that will do that. This is your era. You've come ahead and come of age in this era. We need you. We need your pragmatism. We need your empathy. We need your compassion. We need your collaboration to make this not only a better digital age, but a better world. Thank you very, very much.